So to give us lay folk, that's what you call those that are not in the professional realm here, about what is going on with not just the cynical nature of this organization that claims to be a news organization, but the legal ramifications, if there are any legal ramifications. We're going to welcome an expert in this, RonNell Anderson Jones, the Lee Teitelbaum Professor of Law at the University of Utah and an affiliated fellow at the Yale Law School Information Society Project. Did I get that right, Professor?
You did. That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this Dominion lawsuit against Fox News. I am not a big city lawyer. I'm just a simple man. But it seems to me that if you purposefully lie consistently, and you understand that you are lying. Now, I don't know the legal term malice aforethought or malicious or any of those things. There should be some ramifications to purposeful lying.
There are. And notwithstanding your lack of big city lawyer status, it turns out that you've summarized it pretty well. We have purposefully, importantly, for constitutional reasons, very high bar in this situation. We don't want it to be particularly easy to sue for defamation, particularly on matters of public concern. And when the folks that are being that are bringing the suit are public figures or public officials. And in fact, I and others who work in this space spent a lot of the Trump era emphasizing this. You might remember that then candidate Trump in 2015 famously said he wanted to sort of, his words were, open up libel law, make it really easy for folks like him to be able to threaten and bring suit against critics. And
are you suggesting, wait, are you suggesting that the right in this country is being hoisted on their own petards, and that they are wearing petards? Is that what you are suggesting?
There is definitely some a gap between what Trump has advocated should be the ease with which somebody can bring a defamation suit and the ease with which Fox would like there to be a defamation suit in this setting. And we do know that constitutionally, the Supreme Court has made clear in a case called New York Times versus Sullivan that for First Amendment purposes, for purposes of preserving vibrant, open debate on matters of public concern, and also for democracy preservation purposes, making clear that public officials and public figures can't weaponize defamation law to try to silence their critics or tamp down dissent. We want it to be really, really hard to bring these sorts of suits. And so the standard is a standard called the actual malice standard. And basically it says actual malice. Yes.
Not just sort of malice.
Actual
malice.
It's really a funny term to use because it means neither actual nor malice. It means knowing falsity, or at least reckless disregard for the truth. And the idea is that journalists and other speakers and commentators are sometimes going to talk about matters of public concern in ways that aren't perfectly careful, that are a little bit sloppy, that lies and falsehoods are sometimes going to make their way into public discourse, and we're going to counter them in a wide variety of ways.
But it may be inadvertent. It may be something that occurs, but is not necessarily done with a forethought, because I'm going to start using legalese. A forethought, which is like a forethought with the letter A in front of it. Now, so this standard of actual malice, this is what's been established by New York Times versus Sullivan. And the actual malice is that you have to knowingly be repeating or allowing falsehoods. And so if I'm reading the text messages, there are many from the Fox News hosts which say things like, these people that we are putting on the air are fucking crazy. They are lying. The one Fox News reporter, I believe her name is Jackie Heinrich, she reported that these election lies were not true, and they were texting back and forth, you must fire this person.
Yes.
Again, in terms of the types of things you've seen in your long history studying these types, How blatant is the disregard for truth and standards in this case?
So this is far and away the most evidentiarily supported claim of actual malice that I've seen in a major media case. We very often, so we should note that these cases almost never get to this stage. They
settle usually.
They settle, and in fact, they often settle because they are so hard to prove, right? The actual malice standard is so difficult to achieve. And when it is proven, it's often not knowing falsity. Instead, it's this sort of body of circumstantial evidence of, that they should have known, right? They had a high degree of subjective, sort of probable awareness. So we're piecing together in a lot of those cases. This is not
that.
This is not that. This is direct evidence of knowing falsity. It's There's a famous case that I teach to my students where the Supreme Court says it essentially it will almost never be the case that you'll be able to prove this up sort of out of the horse's mouth, right? The likelihood that you will find evidence of them saying, we know this is a lie and we would like to move forward with it anyway, is deeply unlikely. And here there is, this filing contains just this trove of evidence of emails and text messages and internal memos. It's rare both as to the volume of the evidence and as to the directness of the evidence, and also as to the sort of subcurrent, the narrative of the motivation of this gravitational pull that we seem to see.
This even gives motivation, though. When you talk about the explicitness, when you've got Rupert Murdoch, who is the owner, head, de facto emperor of Fox News Corp, explicitly stating to the president of Fox News, we must do what we can to help Republicans, this is later, gain control of the Senate. We're in such different area here as far as, forget about even just the actual malice of allowing the lies on the air. We have a propaganda arm for a political movement that is operating with impunity. I don't even know where to start with this.
I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this filing is that sort of not perfectly legally relevant, but still a very important part of the narrative arc of Dominion's filing here is this sort of subcurrent about the deep interrelationship between Fox News and the Trump administration and the sort of key players in both spaces, advising, seeking feedback from, fearing, wanting to coordinate with. And the narrative that has been woven in this filing is really interesting because a piece of what the lawyers for Dominion are essentially suggesting is that a lot of what Fox News and the Trump administration have been saying in their sort of enemy of the people framing, right? Their fairly consistent attacks on the mainstream media as being elites who engage as political operatives and mouthpieces of a political party.
That's right. The very thing that they are doing.
And the filing here strongly suggests that that's the sort of dominant model at Fox News, and they tie this in to make their case about actual malice, to suggest that they were motivated to sort of keep this audience share that was gravitating at Trump's suggestion to Newsmax and other organizations that were more willing to engage these election denialism claims. And sort of wanting to preserve them.
They got primary. They got primary by the right, by trying to hold to a certain amount of truth. But these feel like two separate issues here. One is, we can deal with this from the Trump administration aspect of it and the fact that Fox News is nervous about their business model. But there is a larger point here, which is Roger Ailes began this network as a way to deflect criticism and any kind of factual attacks on the conservative movement. This was created purposefully, not to engage in a fact-based, more conservative worldview that would seek to illuminate and articulate various points of view from the more William Buckley side of the aisle. This was done explicitly with the purpose of devaluing legitimate criticism, attacking any kind of threat that the conservative right may have found. This is not in any way something that I mean, legally, I don't know that you could ever do anything about it other than this part about, actual malice and knowing that they were lying. But they've known they were lying from the get-go, from jump, from the minute they came on the air. They've known. It's the feature of the network. They not only do they understand that they're lying, they have to lie, because they have to lie not just to keep the audience, but to keep this movement in power. And that's the larger question.
That's right. And I think it's the complexity that we see about the use of defamation law as a tool to remedy large scale societal falsehoods, right? Which is what we're trying to do here, and what
a propaganda outfit.
What we also see happening in a number of other. This is not the only defamation case surrounding the so-called big lie, right? There's another voting machine company that is bringing a defamation suit. There are separate defamation claims against Sidney Powell and against Rudy Giuliani. And one big question that we have here, I mean, defamation law is designed to do a smattering of things. I mean, one thing that it is definitely designed to do is sort of pay damages for harm done, right? Dominion here says, you ruined our reputation and you owe us for that. But another goal that defamation law has is a sort of broader remedial goal, which is to sort of fix the lie in the public space, where sort of set the record straight and have a judicial declaration of the truth. And one thing that is sort of getting much less attention than sort of Fox knew and when it knew it is the sort of portion of this brief that Dominion has to prove falsity. And so there's a huge segment of this brief that sort of makes its way carefully through disabusing some of the falsehoods that we're told here, really declaring a judicial record about what really is the truth about these voting companies and about the election integrity. Okay. And so we have this sort of separate thing happening here. But one of the pieces that's tricky about it is that remedial role really presupposes truth seekers on the other side of it. And so if what we have are media consumers in America who are consuming media not to seek truth, but rather to sort of reaffirm their own cultural or political identities, or to stay in a comfort zone that doesn't require them to credit any facts that conflict with their preconceived notions of the world, then it's harder to think about the capacity of defamation law to dislodge those falsehoods.
Are you suggesting in some ways, Professor, that the Fox News viewer might be a snowflake? Are you suggesting that they are so fragile that if they were to be presented with facts that are counter to the worldview, the conspiratorial worldview that they have about power elites seeking to keep the conservative and right-wing movement down, that they would fall apart, or at the very least go to OAN, and that this easily triggered nature on their part? I mean, what it brings up is the entire worldview that they broadcast is utterly upside down. It reminds me of, years ago, I had a friend of mine who was a journalist who was arrested in Iran, and he was sent to Evin prison. And the charge was that he was a spy, and that he was, through the auspices of working at Newsweek, was actually sent to destabilize the Iranian regime. And he was held in solitary confinement in Evin prison. What he explained to me was the reason that comes so easily to them is their reporters are spies. And so what it says to me is this comes easily to Fox News because they are an organization that is sent here to lie and destabilize the American government and the American democracy. How is this not, in some ways, espionage? How is this not utterly It's such a much larger issue. And how is Rupert Murdoch, he can't have these organizations in other countries that have tougher libel laws. He can't get away with it. How is there not a RICO case against Murdoch? How is there not a class action lawsuit by the founders against an organization that is explicitly lying to destabilize our democracy?
So 2 points, I guess. One point is that defamation law is sort of by definition a limited tool, right? Tort law has its boundaries, and in fact, this it has really significant boundaries, because you can't actually bring a defamation suit purely for purposes of combating a lie. It has to be a reputation harming lie, right? There has to be somebody
really?
On the other end of it who was defamed. So there are huge swaths of conspiracy theories and falsehoods that are propagated in the media and on social media that aren't really, defamation law can't be the vehicle by which we legally challenge them. We have to have somebody like Dominion on the other end saying, you told a false and defamatory statement and it caused harm to us. And so
someone has to have standing.
Yeah, and broad claims, sort of broad. In fact, some of the arguably most dangerous sort of widespread societal lies of recent years. Something just a broad-based statement like the election was stolen, or vaccines contain magnets or codes or microchips. Without there being someone who is the defamed party on the other end, defamation law isn't the tool that we can use, and so defamation law has to be part of a wider sort of complex array of tools that are used to tackle disinformation, both sort of on the supply end and on the demand end. And I think we really sit at a moment of sort of complexity of trying to think about how we tackle conspiratorial thinking and lies that are appealing to people and so spread with such virality.
And designed to do so.
A big piece of this claim is that. A big piece of the claim in this case is that there was a strategic decision. There's a memo. It's not getting a lot of attention, but there's a memo that's in the evidence in this particular file where someone at Fox says, this kind of conspiratorial reporting sort of seems to be what the Fox News viewers are craving, and they're making reference to what's happening over on Newsmax, and it's a sort of appetite acknowledgement, right? There is an appetite for this, and we fear, and particularly the way that the briefing is set up, it's designed to show the story arc after Fox News called the election for Biden in Arizona, and that there was a great deal of upset, and folks sort of gravitated over to other organizations that were more willing to platform Sidney Powell and Giuliani and others who were spreading this information about Dominion. And so thinking about the nature of the audience, thinking on the sort of supply side, is a really complicated question. And it's particularly complicated. The filing sort of suggests that Fox was stuck with a problem of its own making. That is, that it had set folks up to be so loyal and to see this interconnection between Fox and the Trump administration and the broader conservative movement that when Trump himself came out and said, everybody abandon Fox and head over to Newsmax to get more of this election denialism, they did so, and then Fox was left in a panic.
And you're suggesting that in the way that, let's say, Dr. Frankenstein may have an issue with when the monster turns and says, I think maybe I'd like to take your head off. And then there's something that they have to do there. And everybody always thinks they can be smarter at that. But is there anything so let's look at maybe some of the defamation cases that were in the popular culture over the last couple of years. The main one I can think of is that kid, Nicholas Sandman from Covington High School, right? And he sued a bunch of outlets for defamation of his character. And I don't know if he won the cases. I believe they were settled.
They were, yes.
But imagine if in discovery, the emails from CNN hosts said, I know this kid is okay, and that he didn't do anything wrong, but we are going to keep sticking it to him because our audience doesn't like him, and this flatters their prejudice. And we're just going to keep coming at him because it's good for our business.
Yes, that's actually a very it's an excellent example of the dynamic that we seem to have here, and it also, I mean, to be truthful, right? I teach in this area. I teach law students these cases, and I have to write exams where I test their ability to make these sorts of arguments and to work on behalf of clients in this space. And in some respects, the kind of fact pattern that is set forth in the filing from Dominion that's just been made public is too easy. That is, it's too direct. It wouldn't be a good enough case.
You'd be teaching a remedial class. If this were to line up like this, they would say, "My God, this would never happen. It's too on the nose. So you can't teach it in a law school class because it's such a slam dunk."
Yes. I haven't ever written an exam that had direct evidence of knowing falsity, because it doesn't happen with any real frequency. We should also note, it might be of interest, there are huge portions of this filing that are still redacted. I read...
why would they be redacted?
Like a nerd, I read all almost 200 pages of it. There are portions that Fox has fought to keep from public view for a variety of reasons, probably arguing reporters' privilege or confidentiality or internal rules. It's being litigated.
There are things in here that are worse than what we are seeing. The things that we are seeing are the things that Fox News thought, all right, we can let that go. But there is more underneath that. I mean, this is a criminal enterprise.
Either they thought that they could let it go, or they thought, or they lost in an effort to redact it. But there are portions that I'm really quite eager to see as a defamation scholar. There are portions where it says something like key people involved in the stories involving Dominion squarely acknowledged that it was false and that they were moving forward for these reasons. And then there'll be a full page of blacked out language. And then the lawyers in the aftermath of that say exactly. As if out of the mouths of Fox News, someone at Fox News has made their case for them, is the suggestion. So contextually, there's some suggestion that there is evidence that we've not yet seen that further promotes their argument about actual malice. It's also the case that Rupert Murdoch was deposed after this brief was filed. And so there's additional evidence that might have come from the deposition of Rupert Murdoch that hasn't been included in this.
Professor, is there a difference if the Fox hosts are saying, we're doing this because our business model depends on it, or we're doing this to keep the right in power? Does it make a difference legally what their justification is for this actual malice?
No. In fact, this is the reason why actual malice is such an sort of inappropriate term here. The law doesn't really care about Fox's relationship with its viewers or Fox's relationship with the Trump administration. The law cares about Fox's relationship with the truth. And so
they have a relationship with well, right now, I think they're, not even friends with benefits. Their relationship with the truth is as cold as ice. They are exes that haven't seen each other in maybe 20 years.
Right. So if the defamation plaintiffs here can demonstrate that they have no relationship with the truth, or that more to the point, that their relationship with the truth is that they knew that what they were saying was false and they said it anyway, or they acted with reckless disregard for the truth, then what caused them to act with reckless disregard for the truth isn't particularly pertinent, although you can see how it's helpful. The filing itself weaves this narrative arc that is suggesting that it sort of makes sense in terms of both the kinds of statements that they're making about knowing falsity, but also the sets of statements that they're being made about what might draw them to want to continue to discuss things in this way. All really powerful evidence to present before the determiner of fact, here a jury if they move forward with trial, that suggests that the actual malice standard can be met. We should note that, part of what Fox is saying here, that we haven't seen the full response from Fox here.
Well, we've seen their PR department, which says you're cherry picking. You're taking only the things where we state explicitly that we know we are lying. I mean, what about the times when we don't say that? What about the times when I didn't stab the person? That you're not counting that.
That's not the absence of actual malice. That's just the absence of more actual malice. But it is, of course, the case that the foundational First Amendment arguments here, broadly speaking, about what we want to have be permissible in conversations in our society are true. It is. I feel quite strongly that a sitting president challenging the validity of an ongoing election is nothing if not objectively newsworthy, right? Conversations
no question.
about that,
and by the way, can be legitimate.
Of course.
No question.
Election denialism was, of course, getting coverage at lots of other news outlets across the country at the time. And so you're going to see, of course, the Fox briefing is going to lean into this, right? It's going to emphasize there were some folks internally who were hopeful that these claims about Dominion were true, and others who were skeptical of it, and that it was a mixed bag, and that they were just asking questions and answering questions. They weren't. The briefing here is pretty powerful in this regard. There's a line here in Dominion's motion for summary judgment that says, we've been at this for something like 8 months of discovery. We've deposed everybody top to bottom, from the head of the corporate parent to the producers on the show. And no person that we've deposed under oath has said that they believed anything that was being said about Dominion. And that struck me as a pretty powerful takeaway from that filing. If that's the case.
Well, I think the larger point is not even so much that they were saying, we knew they were lying, we put them on the air anyway. It really is Rupert Murdoch's email to the head of Fox News saying, do whatever you can to help Trump. Let's focus on Georgia. Let's make sure that we help their. What it speaks to is all these other actions are under the rubric of something larger, which is we are a political propaganda arm. And I guess ultimately, legally, them knowing they're lying and you can do defamation, but is there a larger point to truth in advertising? Is this something as simple as, do they have to remove the news from their name? And then, because listen, in the old days, they argued, I think there was another defamation case against Tucker Carlson. And I think Fox argued, their legal brief was, look, he's evil. He's an evil person. We don't like him. We feel that he's a terrible person, so don't take note. I think their argument was no reasonable person would believe what he says. And they argue it persuasively. Is this as simple as Fox just going like, hey, man, take the news, take the name news out of our name, and everything we do is fine?
Well, so two separate points on that. I mean, the first and a key one is the New York Times versus Sullivan standard doesn't apply just to protect news organizations or journalists. It's a standard. It's a First Amendment standard that applies. I was going to say to regular people like you and me, to regular people like me,
and me,
right? But
I'm not news.
But you do. You speak and comment on matters of public concern for a living.
And I rely on satire law. I rely on First Amendment, fair use, and satire, and all those different things. But I never suggest that we are a journalism outfit, or that we are news, or that we are fair and balanced. We are very clearly, we are what we are.
Yes, and there's an interesting dynamic that's in play here in all of the moving parts on the different defamation suits that are floating out there. Mm-hmm. So there have been arguments in one of the cases directly against Sidney Powell. So Powell and Giuliani and some individual Fox hosts are themselves the defendants in suits. So Smartmatic and Dominion have sued them directly in addition to this suit against Fox News. And at one point, Sidney Powell's lawyers argued essentially that no reasonable person would have thought these to be real assertions of fact, that they were simply a sort of rhetorical hyperbole and not meant to be taken as factually true.
I thought they would argue the opposite. I thought they would argue, I thought they would argue the Costanza standard, which is it's not a lie if you believe it. And I would have thought that Sidney Powell would be arguing, oh, no, she's not defaming you. She's nuts.
It's a little, it certainly is a little tricky. We actually see some information about Sidney Powell's own sources in this filing. The Dominion case against Fox included within its discovery information about what Fox News knew were Sidney Powell's sources of information.
Which was apparently a time traveler.
Yes. Either a person who characterized themselves as a time traveler who was potentially also a ghost, who said that they received messages from the wind, and that they had experienced a partial internal decapitation that gave them special powers to see things. Yeah. And that's the kind of brief.
That's in the brief.
That's actually the kind of information that you sometimes see in these sorts of defamation suits trying to prove up actual malice. It's that it was so implausible, right? That the sourcing was so poor that no reasonable journalistic outlet would have believed it. But of course, not acting as a reasonable journalistic outlet isn't a high enough. It doesn't reach the standard. You can engage in sloppy journalism and not meet the actual malice standard. Rather, you have to get to a place where there's this clear and convincing evidence that you had knowing falsity.
Do you think that this is a case of an organization, a propaganda arm of a political movement, knowingly exploiting? You know, in some ways, it's they hate our freedoms, and so they're going to exploit the cracks in a system that believes in the First Amendment. They're going to exploit that and leverage that to gain their own political power. Aren't they gaming a system designed to give journalists broad leeway in trying to expose truth by basically reverse engineering it to create falsehoods and then exploit those falsehoods which appeal to the basest instincts of their audience? Keep that fear going, keep that divisiveness going. They're the ones who are culturally cleaving this nation. They are the ones exploiting those loopholes to continue to divide us in ways that are leading to an increase in violence and all kinds of other issues. And how do you then attack it through that?
So I think in the coming weeks and months, as we, not just this defamation suit, but a series of others that are sort of brought on the same premise, right? That a lie was told, that harmed an individual reputation, but that also caused wider societal harm. That these were sort of major democracy harming lies. The tension that we're going to see here, you're going to see folks on the one hand expressing concern about the weaponization of defamation law, as we described, right? The risks that are involved in making it too easy to sue for defamation and allowing powerful folks to be able to sort of hold out the possibility of crippling damages for sort of minor error and stifling debate. So the weaponization of defamation law on the one hand, and we're going to see that contrasted with the very real risks of the weaponization of First Amendment protection and the concerns that might exist if we can, in the name of a broad construction of free speech law, sort of enable lies that harm not just individuals and organizations, but harm the public writ large.
Right.
And that kind of tension between those two spaces is really the sort of core thing that we have on deck coming forward. And we haven't really had to tussle with it in significant ways in quite a long time, in part because we haven't had any defamation suits that have teed up sort of issues of this caliber.
Right.
And we also haven't had any that have proceeded to this stage where we've had this kind of evidentiary record built. Yes.
And the irony here is, if this is now a question of finally the court system helping to sort out and put into explicit terms the strategies that are employed by a propaganda unit. And what's so kind of ironic here is that Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, these are folks that are seeking to weaken Sullivan, that are seeking to broaden the ability for defamation. They are once again, and I hate to bring up the petard, but there is a serious petard. They have a petard issue. And I wonder if, the courts have proven themselves throughout this to be an incredibly resilient guardrail on these shenanigans, truly. And I think what it shows is when you look at an organization that seeks to weaponize the First Amendment, I'm sure they're going to seek to undercut the courts as well and weaponize the courts and appoint people who won't hold to these kinds of standards and will rule in their favor, which we've already seen them try to do. I wonder if something like this, if Fox loses, they take this to the Supreme Court, I would assume. And I would imagine this puts Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch and the others who seek to weaken defamation laws in a very strange position, which is, this is everything that I have said I'm trying to fight against, but it's my political movement. And I'm actually a tool in that propaganda machine. How do I deal with that?
It's a truly complex moment for the New York Times versus Sullivan standard, and you're right that there's an exceptional tension here in what we think of as, if we were going to try to label it, the conservative position on this question of free speech. Gorsuch and Thomas have both now chimed in separately and together in a series of cases where libel cases have come to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court hasn't taken them. But these justices have chimed in separately to say we should have taken this case, and we should have taken this case as a mechanism for unwinding the protections of Sullivan, scaling back and making it easier for folks who are public figures or public officials to do so. And interestingly, the position, at least Gorsuch, Justice Thomas's position on this is an originalist one. He says the founders would have allowed these sorts of suits, and we should interpret the Constitution the way that something happened in 1790.
Yes, because they speak to him through time travel, because he had a decapitation. And he and Sidney Powell talk to the founders all the time, and they explain very, very clearly, you should take that suit and also give everyone an AR-15. That's what the founders would say explicitly.
The originalist view is a little idiosyncratic. He's the only justice on the court who holds it. But Gorsuch has chimed in to say he agrees, but for different reasons. And interestingly, his reasons are the reasons that you and I have been discussing today. That is, he thinks that the standard might be enabling a system of disinformation, the spread of disinformation in ways that are problematic. And in particular, he's concerned about the new media landscape, the ways in which through social media, lies can sort of take flight and become viral, and there are no meaningful consequences for them doing so. And so, in his mind, adjusting the defamation standard, the constitutional protections in that setting, is the right sort of tool to ratchet for all the reasons that I've described. Right, that defamation suits have all sorts of limitations and only work when we have a lie that actually directly harms the reputation. I'm not sure that that's a good trade-off to make.
No, but the accountability for a news organization has always been that they would regulate so that they could protect their reputation as honest brokers or truth tellers. The anomaly here for Fox is they argue a standard that they themselves would never uphold. There's an accountability in most news organizations. If they find that there is a prejudice, or somebody has made a decision to air a falsehood purposefully, or has tried to twist something purely for a partisan, generally there will be some sort of recrimination, some sort of penalty. When it comes to Fox, there is none. Because the truth is, this helps them, as they say, in the primary. Maybe not in the general, but it helps them in the primary. It's rewarded. And they never hold their host to account. I can't tell you the shit they gave me when it was revealed that I met with Obama twice over 8 years. By the way, not revealed, it was in the visitor logs. And it wasn't to discuss how I could help the Obamas. It was him sort of saying to me, like, I think you're making young people cynical. And it was his concern about that. Meanwhile, Sean Hannity and those people are literally strategizing with presidents and people on the phone. There is no accountability on that side. And that is what they rely on. They rely on working the refs and holding these other groups to a standard that they would never comply with. And by using that, it is a strategy to neuter what you consider to be opposition that could hurt your political movement. It's Orwellian. It is unbelievably antithetical to what we supposedly believe is a free country.
Yeah, the concern about the role of the courts in all of this and the power of the courts in all of this, I think, is a really interesting and complicated one. And particularly when we take into account what we've been saying about what the social science data suggests to us about the difficulty of dislodging views that are deeply ingrained within a space, which is a prominent theme that you see in the filing in this case, right? The sort of the prominent theme here is that Fox got anxious because folks didn't want to receive the truth about this election denialism and were gravitating elsewhere to places that would continue to tell the lie about Dominion.
But it's the whole truth for everything they do. They don't want to receive the truth about Black people in this country. They don't want to see the truth about gender care. They don't want to receive the truth about a variety of issues. There is a difference between viewpoints that don't align and weaponizing issues to create cultural fault lines. And that's what I'm suggesting, is that their business model is weaponizing cultural fault lines. And how do we get to that larger point?
And a piece of what might concern us about the sort of ingrained nature of these media models is that do we get to a place in which the outcome of defamation laws can't serve that remedial purpose that we described. So one place in which I've been following this closely in the last 6 months or so is Alex Jones, who has also been involved in a prominent defamation suit involving Sandy Hook parents, suggesting that they were sort of paid actors who pretended that their children had been the victims of mass murder. And we have defamation damages running in the millions. And there's still some very strong suggestion that this moved the needle not at all in terms of the beliefs of the listening audience.
But that should never be the standard. The standard can never be what we put out there will move the needle. And I'll go you one further. Alex Jones is a far less pernicious influence on this country than Fox News, by far. People know what that cat is. They know if it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, walks like they know what that is. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't have influence. And that doesn't mean that he didn't defame those parents, because he did. And he caused them grave damage. But as a cultural pathogen, Fox News is far more powerful, far more devious, far more pernicious, and has created far more damage than Alex Jones ever will. And at least Alex Jones gives you supplements to help offset the damage. I mean, that's the beautiful part about what he does. Now, if Fox would give you supplements, perhaps that would be. But do you understand what I'm saying? There is no way. Alex Jones is a wolf in wolf's clothing. Fox News is the opposite.
Yes, but if the evidence that is brought forth in this filing, this most recent filing about Fox News, is to be credited, and if it is the case that the gravitational pull of the audience demand, right, that sort of symbiotic relationship between folks who crave information that supports that worldview, Fox is tailoring, sort of tacking in that direction in order to continue to feed that, then a similar problem exists, which is we could have a judgment in this case. Let's imagine that actual malice is proven, that a jury and a judge agree that there was knowing falsity, reckless disregard for the truth in this dynamic, and that the claims that were made are objectively not true. That is, that the election was not rigged, and the company did not design itself for Hugo Chavez, and there is no algorithm that can change a vote that was cast in one direction and siphon it off for another. They declare that to be judicially determined truth, and they further declare that Fox News knew this, that the corporate parent or the key actors in the dynamic were aware of knowing falsity and moved forward to perpetuate a knowing lie. The question is, how will Fox News viewers come to know this information? Fox News itself is not going to be inclined to do a story about it, to cover that information, to sort of share those details.
They didn't. This weekend, they've got a media critic, a guy named Howard Kurtz. He's their media critic. He got on the air on Sunday and ran through the Don Lemon shit and all kinds of other stuff and didn't even bring it up. Didn't even mention it. Just it's not happening. Because in the bubble that they've created, that can't get in there. But isn't the point that it doesn't matter? Look, Gawker was put out of business for far less than what is going on here. And we really don't have mechanisms to hold that to account. And I've got my problems with CNN and MSNBC and news media writ large. But there is nothing like this, man. This is a totally different animal.
So the key mechanism maybe here is the sort of preventative deterrent value of staggering damages, which is something that we've not touched on, but that I think might be important. I mean, we do know that there is a deterrent value that comes about from these sorts of large compensatory damage claims. You
think that can change behavior to some extent?
I think we have at least some evidence that it, and I should note that as a First Amendment scholar, I have nervousness about celebrating the deterrent value. I don't wish to celebrate the chilling effect on speech, but I don't have any problem with celebrating the adjudication of knowing lies and the awarding of damages in those situations that sort of sends a message about social norms and the breach of those social norms. And here we do have at least some evidence that that behavior is altered by this. So, I mean, the very best example may be Lou Dobbs, who is the highest rated program on Fox Business. And within something like 48 hours after the bringing of the Smartmatic suit in this case was canceled, lost a show. There is lots of evidence over at Newsmax where they were even less well-resourced.
Yeah. The head of Fox News said Lou Dobbs does a less nuanced show than they do in North Korea. So even that was
a real gem from this filing. Yes.
They know. And here's the truth of it. If they change their behavior, they do lose their audience, because they've created, if a crack dealer decides, you know what, we can't make crack anymore because now the police are coming and now we can only sell, an herbal, 5-hour energy drink, they're going to lose their audience, because they're the ones who accustomed their audience to this lie, to this crack. They've been selling crack to their audience for years, and they're hooked, and they draw in more people. And if they pull back from that, they understand someone will try and fill that void. So they actually can't change, because if they do, they're done.
Yeah, there are memos and emails in this motion for summary judgment that are described that essentially make the argument that you've just described. Producers to Tucker Carlson saying, all that our viewers want to hear tonight is this election denialism.
That's right.
Tucker Carlson himself texting other hosts within the space to say things like, if we counter this, right, the reporter who was fact checking it, right, is damaging the brand, and that kind of material from Discovery, I think, is going to be powerful. It has been powerful. It's had a powerful sort of aftershock, not just as to this case, but as to the wider dialogue that folks are having about the role of Fox News and the motivation of it in this space.
Absolutely. And imagine this, a news organization in America putting in a filing that truth will damage our brand. Truth. Fuck. Amazing. Professor, thank you.
Thank you.
We've been talking with RonNell Anderson Jones, the Lee Teitelbaum Professor of Law at the University of Utah and affiliated fellow at the Yale Law School Information Society Project. Absolutely fantastic information. And it's just an absolute treat for me to talk to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about.
I'm so happy that our confusing little corner of the world can get translated to everybody else in ways that help them.
You're really concise and really articulate with it, and it's much appreciated.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thank you.